looks like we're already recording. So we'll just start with Joel. Joel, why don't you introduce yourself? Kind of tell us who you are, where you're stationed, and what class, ODS class you were. And then we'll kind of go around the circle with Anna and Kat too, and then we'll start with our questions today.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Samantha. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Anna, nice to see you. I got my PsyD at St. Mary's University in Minnesota, and then commissioned in to finish my degree. I think hey, William, I think I was the class of 22 in ODS, I believe. And right now I am stationed in Sasebo, Japan. It's the first station. So I came into the Navy wanting to practice overseas, wanting to travel. And kind of right out of the chute, I was able to do that with my first duty station. So I felt really lucky. It really came together for me in that regard. So yeah, just looking forward to answering everyone's questions and get to know you more. If there's more you want to know about me, please ask.
Awesome, thanks. Anna, why don't you go next?
Yeah, so I'm Lieutenant Anna Donaldson. I went to Florida State University and then went to the Walter Reed internship. I was in the same year as Joel, so we went to ODS together, and it was 22, so July-ish timeframe of 22. Completed internship in 2023 and went to 2nd Medical Battalion, which is one of our embedded opportunities that we have. So I'm embedded with the Marine Corps right now at Medical Battalion located in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Great, thanks. Kat?
Hey, sorry I dropped off. I was trying to figure out if I could get camera, but I'm also embedded with the Marine Corps and in austere technological circumstances. So I apologize in advance for not having camera. I'll try to have the personality to make up for it. So I'm Kat Hannigan. I did my internship the same year Sam did her internship, just on different coasts. So I was at the Walter Reed internship the year before Anna. I went to Regent University prior to that. So I guess my kind of thing that makes me a little bit different, Joel, I apologize, I didn't hear your intro, but I went through ODS as a mom of two. I went through internship as a mom of two, and now I'm a mom of three. So if you have specific questions about navigating family and the ODS experience or anything beyond, please feel free to ask a question on here or afterwards. After internship, I got sent to the Naval Health Clinic in Hawaii, a very hard location to be for certain. And then after a year in Hawaii, the Marine Air Wing billet over here on Marine Corps Base, Hawaii, popped open. I raised my hand. They sent me, and so I've been developing that program ever since. And then we'll be headed to another duty station here this fall. So that's about it for me. Over to you, Sam.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Sam De Los Santos. I am also embedded with the Marine Corps, so we have lots of embedded with Marine Corps folks here. So, if you have questions about that at the end and what that entails, I'm sure that all of us would be happy to share. I'm also stationed in North Carolina. I'm with a Marine Air Group out here. I finished my grad school program up in Minnesota, and I did the San Diego internship. So it's been a really great run so far, and it's been really enjoyable. So we can tell you all things Navy, especially after we kind of go over the things with ODS. But let's kind of get to it and talk a little bit about ODS. I'm going to mostly just be asking the questions. So why don't we start out by just first saying maybe what like the general agenda typically looks like at ODS, like not necessarily week by week, but like just kind of the general things that people can expect to do there. And any of you can kind of jump in to answer that.
I can, I'll go first. So in general, it's a lot of leadership development. So ODS, Officer Development School, right? So they're focused on developing your officership. It's kind of your Navy 101. The people who attend ODS are all kind of your professional individuals, right? So like us, clinical psychologists, but you'll also have chaplains, you'll have lawyers, you'll have other medical personnel. So it's a big hodgepodge of people in coming from like the civilian professional world. So it's high level topics are kind of around leadership. What does a Navy officer do? The role of a junior officer in particular. A lot of people will go straight into what we call DIVO roles or division officers. So how do you lead with your enlisted personnel? What is the makeup of general things? Stuff like that. And then can get down into some of the more nitty-gritty stuff, some ethics from a more of a leadership side of the house, privacy, HIPAA, operational security, or what we call OPSEC, things like that. So if you did pretty much a lot of PowerPoints, you have most of your days, once you actually get into the bulk of it, is going to be sitting in a relatively large auditorium, getting kind of that PowerPoint discussion, training type of stuff. I'll leave it there from my initial statement and open it up for the others to add on to that.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect description of it. I think from a day-to-day standpoint, you should expect a pretty structured kind of schedule. You wake up early. I mean, think of it like, I kind of thought of it as mini boot camp in a way. I don't think it's anything like boot camp, but it allowed me, who'd never had any military experience, to come in and get some flavor of the structure, the day-to-day, the order, and the tasking kind of, right, of what's expected, and introducing us to some of our responsibilities. So when we did get into the Navy and we were working with our enlisted fellows, right, we have some understanding of some of what they're talking about. So waking up early, coming together for muster, figuring out how to navigate large groups of people from one place to another, doing physical training, eating on a really regimented schedule, right? Having some degree of stress inoculation. So those are all kind of there with it, right? You'll also do the basic standard stuff that you have to do to basically administratively commission into the Navy. So expect to do a lot of paperwork, immunizations, and things like that. You'll have some support in being able to get to your next station, do some of the things you need to do, right? But all of that is kind of wrapped in along with all of that training as well.
In a couple years, but I'll just add to that the things that you'll see there as well. I think in terms of what to expect, my counterparts have already done a really good job. What else you'll see there that will be different than your experience is OCS, so Officer Candidate School. The difference between what we're doing and what they're doing is they're there, they're earning their commission. You, by virtue of the doctorate that you have earned your commission already from the Navy. And this used to be called, I think, Officer Indoctrination School. So it's meant, as Joel said, to give you a slice. Some people, and if you haven't already heard it referred to, will refer to it as fork and knife school. But it won't teach you everything that you need to know about being an officer. And it's certainly a small piece of a proving ground. But you know, the best advice that I can give you for that is like let yourself be indoctrinated, like let yourself drink a little bit of the Kool-Aid, because you're only going to get a little bit of it there. So I have seen, and my counterparts can speak to this, people having a harder time when they just try to resist. Like, just drink a little bit. I promise that you can spit it out later if you want to.
What would you say, would either of you or all three of you, what was your opinion on the physical demand of ODS?
I'm pretty athletic, did soccer beforehand, so I actually felt like it was minimal. I know that there were some other people in my internship class that pushed back on me when I would say that, but to me, in my opinion, it wasn't a super strenuous in terms of PT. If you're somebody who hasn't done a lot of physical activity in a while, then it would probably be good to do a little bit of movement before you get to ODS. But I wouldn't say that it's anything close to like what you would see on basic training or kind of like your typical military, like what you think of. It's not going to be that type of strenuous.
I would agree with Anna. I was doing kind of like HIIT style group fitness for about maybe a year and a half, 2 years, pretty regularly before I commissioned in, and so that's kind of what you would expect. Mostly like body weight group routines, right? That are guided by one of your instructors, and so I found the physical demands not incredibly great, but it does depend on your level of fitness when you get there. Also, I'd caveat that in saying that although I felt pretty fit, I was not really a runner by training or by nature, and so that was one area that I had to train for specifically, and I was able to do that. But that was one of the larger challenges for me, was just getting into that. Also, when I commissioned in, like I really was not a strong swimmer, not confident in that area. And there is a swimming component. In order to pass ODS, you have to pass a swim qualification. So I also had to train in addition before I went, in order to strengthen my swimming skills and feel confident. If you aren't able to do that, because everyone has limitations, if you aren't able to do that, there is going to be training provided. They're not literally going to throw you in the deep end and be like sink or you don't pass. So don't freak out. You'll have a support if you need it there. But for myself, I was able to obtain it, and it made me feel more comfortable and confident going in. So.
Yeah, I'll echo. I've been an athlete most of my life, so that wasn't it wasn't a shock. But I'll speak to the other side of the house to say that, like, if that's not you, if you're not, super comfortable with physical activity, or if it's like fallen by the wayside in grad school like it does, like, you have time. Like, you can get on a program now for the next 4 months and make some significant gains in your comfortability while you're doing those physical activities. You're going to pass all of that stuff. This is not something they want you for the thing that you provide to the Navy. So they'll help you pass. The difference is your comfort level while you're doing it, because ODS can be a really jarring experience because it's just so different. You get pulled away from everything that makes you you and everything that you define yourself as a person. Sam and I have had conversations about this. And so anything that you can do to increase your comfort while you're going through it is going to ultimately help you navigate the other things. You're all psychologists. You all know that, like, the amount of stress inputs matters. So if you can get a little bit more comfortable with running, if you can get a little bit more comfortable in the water, if you can get a little bit more comfortable in group PT, those are the things you can make gains on between here and the time you leave. You can't really do anything about the fact that, like, somebody's going to yell in your face and you don't like that. Like, you can't really do anything about the fact that you don't know anything about the military. All of that will be support. Like, those will be shocks when you get there, but you do have time now, and you just, like, put it on your schedule. Like, if you need a program or anything like that, I can send you the one that I did, like, prior to going, and you can adjust it to your needs. So there's time. Over.
If I can also add to what, agree with everything. For context, you'll do a PRT or a physical readiness test at the onset of ODS, and then you'll do another one at the end. You will do the paperwork and you'll get things signed and stuff like that. It's hit or miss whether your next command will take your training PRT as a part of your PRT. So I say that in that if you're not a strong physical person, just pass. Like, you don't need, like, this is a space where C's get degrees. You just need to pass, and it's okay if you're just getting over that line for you. It's not a big deal in terms of what you're falling within that PRT. It is totally fine. Just do your best. And as Kat said, they'll help you get there to where you need.
And you can find PRT standards just by Googling Navy PRT standards. And it's all broken down by your age and your gender. And so just, you can Google that and figure out what you would need to do as the bare minimum. And I would say, maybe just make that like a training goal, right? Like start kind of knowing that that's where the threshold is. Thank you all for sharing that. What would you say was the most maybe the thing that you didn't expect the most unexpected thing that happened or that you did while at ODS.
I'll jump in on that one since I already kind of talked about it, but the identity shedding that you get, like that I experienced when I got to ODS, was like the thing that I didn't expect. I'm married to the military, so I was a military spouse before I was in the military myself, so I'm not like I wasn't totally aware of what I was getting myself into. But the experience of, like, I told you guys, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a psychologist, I was a student, like all of those things and that I define myself as like get stripped away, you know, like metaphorically and physically, because I'm just away from all of those things. And I think that was the most like, oh, like this is really unnerving, and it makes you vulnerable, but in a way that, like, I was like, okay, I can drink the Kool-Aid, and now I'm going to define myself as a sailor too. Like, so I do think it's purposeful, but I wasn't planning for that. It wasn't something that I was planning for. I don't think I wouldn't change it, because I do think it leads to some of the stress inoculation that Joel was talking about. But yeah, I was totally not expecting that. Over.
Yeah, thanks. I'm trying to kind of figure out how I want to sort of describe it, but I'm not really being very successful in my mind. So forgive me if this doesn't sound incredibly eloquent. But I think for me, one of my biggest surprises, being a pretty like reflective, kind of perhaps introvert or internalized person, was my own responses to a lot of the experience that I was facing, right? I had done what you guys are doing. I had spoken to a ton of people. I'd attended these questionnaires. I knew what I was getting into. And yet at the same time, once I arrived there, right, there's things that are going to be out of your control that you can't prepare for. Like, for instance, when I arrived fresh off the plane, I got sick with something. It wasn't COVID, but it was something, right? And that created like a harder entry for me, right? And so I was kind of surprised sometimes at the ways in which I had to kind of like assert for myself my own self-care, right? The ways in which I reacted to stress or things that were stressful, right? Those things are out of control. At the same time, there's also room for fun. And I actually discovered that some things that I was really maybe apprehensive about actually turned out to be pretty fun, and I felt some accomplishment. So again, kind of like with that swimming thing, right? You also have to jump off this, 10-meter platform, and I was kind of, I was not so sure about that. But I practiced my good sports psych visualization. I pumped myself up. I did. It was sort of fun. You also do a module. You do a couple, like a firefighting module. You do a sinking ship module called the Buttercup. Turns out those are pretty fun. There's also a lot of room for really good like relationships and support finding. And you have to balance out what you need for that, right? So I think for me, there's a good opportunity to learn a lot about yourself. But if you go in with some sort of like acceptance but also some self-compassion for your experience, in which this is different, it is weird. They do things on purpose to try to change things for you and see how you're going to react. And so kind of just understand how you're reacting and be kind for yourself, but also be kind of like what Kat said, if you drink the Kool-Aid a little, like don't necessarily resist, but don't resist your reactions too. Just kind of accept them and see where that takes you.
Agree with what everybody said. And I think I was slightly different in that I drank the Kool-Aid like right away. I like chugged that Kool-Aid. And so I think the thing that surprised me a little bit was how many people weren't, and the tension and the dynamics building of our group. It felt weird at first to have people not drink the Kool-Aid, not follow directions, kind of beat to their own drum a little bit. And I was surprised with some of those just dynamic building and group tension stuff. But it was a good experience, right? Because then I learned what that felt like, and moving through that space. So I was more surprised. I expected everybody else to also drink as much Kool-Aid as I did. And so it was a little weird to navigate that. I don't know how helpful that is, but if somebody thinks that they're gonna, be more like me, happy to kind of talk independently what that felt like, a little bit more detail.
What's something you wish you knew prior to ODS? So if you can like go back and ask your or tell your, prior ODS self something, what's something that you would tell yourself? For me, I would probably say definitely make sure you pack an extension cord. I'm just kidding. But just like maybe some of those packing things I would probably go over, and we can go over those at the end. But what would you also say like that you would tell yourself before ODS?
I would, I actually would probably tell myself to focus a little bit more on building those interpersonal relationships and a little bit less on the specific information that's being passed. You'll hear this phrase a lot, but it's drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And I think if I were to redo it, I would maybe shift my focus from kind of having the most shiny boots or having like the most perfect bed to maybe more of spending a little bit extra time with others in my hallway or other wings too, and kind of building that relationship.
I'll jump in because I was gonna say something similar in terms of like find your person or find your people. Like one of the people I relied on most heavily during ODS is on this call, who's leading this call. Sam and I got like really close at ODS, and I don't think it's super common, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, for people to have like cohort buddies that are not on the same coast, like across like internships. And Sam and I have got close at ODS. We were on different halls, but we got close at ODS and have remained close since. And I think 1000% like we ended up falling into it and relying on each other and relying on our people. But I think that's really what gets you through, especially when you're sleep deprived and overwhelmed and all that stuff. And that really is like a good life lesson for the Navy overall too, is like, you cannot do this alone, like build the relationships with people. So 1000%. And I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think that the relationships that you make while there are just really important for you being able to kind of just get through your experience, but also do it in kind of like a healthy way. And also those are ones that you may take with you too. From a practical standpoint too, I kind of agree with Anna, like stressing less about the idea that if you don't do it just right, that's going to equate to failure or something like that. It was put in my mind several times by my recruiter, but he was like, "You're in the Navy, it's done. They're not kicking you out. Like this is not a make or break scenario, right? You will pass ODS." I think it's up to each individual to do that to their own standards of what they want. But I'd agree. Don't think that those daily tasks and the things that they're assigning you, right? While I think important for the overall understanding of Navy operations, I think that it shouldn't get in the way of forming positive relationships for you, right? But I also think that kind of like knowing yourself as you go in, and knowing what boundaries you want to maybe set, like think about that a little. Like sometimes my wing was very social, full of extroverts, right? They'd be out in the hallway talking and all that kind of stuff. And for myself, more introverted and just needing more sleep. At first, it was difficult sometimes to break away from that and be like, oh, I don't want them to perceive me as such. But in the end, you also have to do what's right for you. So kind of just knowing what you may need before going in, I think would be helpful as well. And just being able to navigate the entire scenario and be able to take care of yourself while getting a good experience out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. So I'm going to just kind of explain a couple of things, just kind of really overarching umbrella stuff, and then we'll dive into the question and answer component for anybody else who's on the call. So after you travel to ODS, you will enter what's called King Hall, which is where all the officers who have commissioned into the Navy have slept since, I don't know, a very long time ago, but it's King Hall is the thing. When you get there, you'll have an opportunity to kind of settle yourself, get your things good to go. There's, I think it's Davy Jones' closet or Davy Jones' locker or something like that. where there's a bunch of things that people have left behind, like fans and extension cords and irons and all of that stuff. If you are one of the first to get there, that is your first stop. You go to Davy Jones' locker and you try and find the things that you are going to need, because the people who were able to scavenge from that locker were better off. So head up that locker, get some of the things that you need. Don't be greedy. Always be sharing, right? Especially with like irons and things like that are kind of like hard to go around. But if you have it in your room, you're the holder of the iron, so you get to dictate when your clothes get ironed, and nobody else gets to control that for you. And then, kind of day one is when it starts. I would say if you are a caffeine drinker or a coffee drinker, the first couple weeks, they don't typically allow you to drink coffee. So either start that process beforehand or plan to have some kind of like caffeine tablets. They'll tell you they're not allowed, so maybe I shouldn't suggest that. But if you're a caffeine drinker, just kind of like accommodate for that. And then the first 2 weeks, I think, are probably the longest. Would you guys agree with that? That the first 2 weeks feel like 6 weeks in themselves? Yeah. So the first 2 weeks are longest. You get the least amount of sleep. You're up doing PT in the morning, getting your uniforms and getting all the things and, getting fire hose with PowerPoints. And then you go to sleep pretty late as well because so much is being established. But then by that third week, you kind of start to hit a groove a little bit. That's when the fun stuff starts to happen. That's when the swim calls happen and the fire trainings happen and the ship stuff happens. And that's when all of the exciting things occur. And then once you get into like the fourth and the fifth week, you've kind of hit mostly a rhythm, and the fifth week kind of starts to die down. You just are in PowerPoints, pretty much all day. Some practical things to just like take note of, like, yes, you will learn how to make a bed, military style. Just enjoy it, embrace it, drink the Kool-Aid, don't resist it. There's a packing list that's out there that they will send you, but definitely connect with some of us or Google online, maybe some additional items to bring, because that packing list doesn't tend to be completely comprehensive. However, anything that you actually need, like while you're there, will be provided to you. So also don't stress about not bringing enough or not bringing something specific, because at the end of the day, like, you're going to have food, you're going to have a place to sleep, you're going to have clothes to wear. And so some of your like home comforts maybe might be the things that you would want to think about packing, but you don't have a lot of opportunity to like display them, right? Like your room will need to be, just in military order throughout the day. So those are just some practical things. And after you complete graduation, it kind of depends on the year that we all went. So for Kat and I, it was still during COVID. And so our weeks before looked a little different. We weren't able to do some of the recreation stuff that historically happens, like going into Boston. But I think that they may have started to initiate that back up again. I'm not quite sure. But after graduation, if you're doing the Navy Psychology program, then you'll go to Navy Med 101, which is another week-long course. And we can talk about that at the end too if people have questions. But that's just kind of a umbrella arching some things that kind of for the flow to expect at ODS. Does anybody have anything to add to that kind of like orientation flow?
We did have the opportunities to go out around the town. We went to Newport. We didn't make it to Boston, but even then we were still in uniform. So I remember in that packing list wondering if I needed to bring civilian clothes or things on the weekends to go out. Anytime that you're allowed off base, you're still going to be in uniform. So, pack maybe one or two civilian outfits, but don't expect to be wearing them really anytime throughout that 5-week period. There's also, you can order things. So you can order things off Amazon. Your family can ship you things. Expect there to be a significant delay, though. I don't think that we actually received mail until probably like week 3 or so, because it took a little bit of time to get things up and running and the process and all of that. So it's definitely not your same day, next day Amazon thing that you might be used to if that's your flow. But that is also an option in case you really forget something and you really need it.
And there's a store on base, so they don't let you go to the store right away, but by like your second-ish week, halfway through your second week, You can just go to the MCX or the next, sorry. I've been on a Marine Corps base too long to get any supplies due.
Yeah, I'll also add there was a controversy about whether or not food was permitted, whether or not you could bring food. And the general consensus was actually incorrect. The general consensus was no food at all. It's not allowed. But in fact, you can bring non-perishable food. So you can bring granola bars, you can bring that kind of stuff, right? And the first couple of weeks, there are significant diet changes. It's not anything to look forward to. It does get better, but yeah. So if you need a little supplementation, I'd recommend it. Also, anyone with dietary restrictions, I will just apologize. It is not very accommodating, and so you'll have to consider your dietary restrictions there. But the options are fairly scant, and even though they do offer kind of like that option for alternatives, the reality is that those meals are not very effective. So just kind of be aware of that.
But there's no limit on how much you can put on your plate. So I will say that I actually gained weight at ODS because we were having like 3 meals a day where I was usually only eating like twice a day. And sometimes I just like overfilled that plate and you've only got 8 minutes to eat. And so you just like shove it in and you don't really realize how full you're getting. So something to consider there. But
Once the galley
okay.
opened, it actually got a lot better.
Yeah, right. So why don't we move to the question and answer portion for anyone who has any questions on the call. Feel free to either unmute yourself or show your camera, whatever feels more comfortable for you. But I'll also be monitoring the chat to see if there's questions in the chat. Anna just mentioned that you'll have a wardrobe locker with your room and you'll have your own lock. They won't ask you to open that locker. So this is where you can keep some of your comfort items and some of those food items and things like that. Kat says that Oreos and Swedish fish were her comfort items. My mother-in-law sent me like a box of See's candy. That was golden. Also a trading item. Just gonna throw that out there. But yeah, any questions from anyone on the call? Yeah, Carolyn, I think you're saying something, but maybe unmute yourself.
Hi, hello. My name is Carolyn Fulton. I'm a first-year PsyD student, and I applied for the HPSB, so I'm awaiting those results. But my question is for any of you who might have gone to ODS while still taking classes while you were still a student, what was that like? Because I know my own administration has said like, oh, well, if you are accepted, will there be a psychologist that can be your supervisor while you're there? So we can try to get you like clinical hours, or like what would that look like?
So I think all of us actually did ODS after we completed the majority of our academic work. Am I right on that? Because we all did the internship accession route. None of us are HPSP candidates, correct? Yeah. So we can definitely like hook you up with somebody who was an HPSP recipient because HPSP is different in that you can do ODS kind of like at a different spot. But you also don't have to rush to get ODS done. Like you're going to get it done before you go. And so there's definitely opportunity to do ODS right before you go on your internship year, even if you are an HPSP recipient. So there's definitely a bunch of different ways to navigate it. If you end up being a HPSP recipient, if you end up getting the scholarship, I would definitely just talk to Dr. Ralph about the timing of when you would want to do ODS and that it works with your academic schedule. No, there will not be a psychologist there to support you for supervision. There's likely not a lot of time to do a lot of homework or to do a lot of writing. Like I plan to work on my dissertation and that happened like a handful of days. So I wouldn't bank on having a lot of extra time there. So that would be the only thing that I would have concerns about if you were in active classes. Even one class would probably be a little bit challenging to to float while you were at ODS. Would you guys agree with that?
1000%. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So it says, do we start to get paid after ODS? I'm worried about providing for my family during the summer. So actually well, it's kind of a tricky question. Technically, we'll get paid starting ODS. When you actually see that paycheck though, different story. So I know for my class specifically, our checks were significantly delayed for some reason. And so a lot of people didn't get paid until like the end of ODS. But you do get paid for your ODS time. So you are getting paid during those 5 weeks. You just may not get the actual checks right away because they need to get you into the military systems and put you in DEERS and like all this other stuff. I'm totally taking over for answering questions. So if anyone wants to jump in here, I apologize for that. But yeah, do you guys have anything to add there?
That was the same thing with us. There was a delay in the timing, but you do receive all of the money, so it's a pretty large check. The other thing that was cool is that if you have a family and you have dependents, you are able to still get some kind of support and like BAH or compensation for where they're located. Because technically, when you're at ODS, you're living in the barracks, your food is there. So if you don't have dependents, I don't think that you would receive BAH. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you won't. If you have dependents, and you can still kind of file additional forms that you get the housing allowance. I'm saying BAH, sorry, basic allowance for housing, I think is what that stands for. But the extra money that we get to pay for food and pay for our living situation. So they do kind of help you out in making sure that you get the right forms filled in and all of that put in.
And Kat just put in the chat that the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society can provide a zero interest $2,000 loan if you need help with bills while you're at ODS and kind of waiting for that paycheck to hit. So there can be kind of some financial support there in that gap time. Somebody or Natasha asked, how many miles should we train to run? And Kat answered, 1.5 mile run is what is included in the PRT. I encourage you to feel comfortable running about 3 miles to have that buffer. I would agree with that. Try and get to the point where you can run 3 miles mostly without stopping. That's probably a good marker. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Mitch is typing a question, so we'll see what comes up from him. But any other questions from those on the call?
Yeah, I have one. First of all, thank you for taking the time today for this. This has been really helpful. Do you think that ODS prepared you well for what you experienced in the Navy?
That's a good question. I don't want to keep jumping in. Joel, do you want to go first? Do you have an answer?
Sure. I can take that on. Did it prepare me well? Yes and no. I mean, I think it gives you the fundamental kinds of, in a way, sort of like didactic information, information about policy, information about practice, that kind of stuff. But by the nature of the program, right, your retention level is going to vary. And then, at least for my experience, right, you go from ODS into internship, and internship is different, right? The purpose of it is different. The setting is going to be different. And so some of those things that you learn at ODS aren't necessarily immediately applied during your internship for lots of various reasons, right? As you go through your Navy career, though, you'll have different points in which you learn that same information, right? Some of it's going to be hands-on, some of it's going to be repetitive didactic learning. And so from that perspective of preparation for it, I think that it's yes and no. I think that kind of like where you maybe land after internship, right? Is ODS going to prepare you? Probably not. Just culturally, you'll have to be adapting into the environment you are. And we've got a lot of folks with Marines here. I'm at a medical treatment facility or a branch clinic here, so more within a hospital system, but additionally within a host nation. right? And so there's different dynamics with that. We serve a lot of folks on fleet, but amphibious vessels, which have a slightly different kind of culture, mission, and need than those on a carrier, for example. So, once you actually get into your environment, then I think you're really going to start to kind of learn and understand what your Navy is, right? And then the next place you go, you're going to learn something different. And the next place you go, you're going to learn something different. So in a way, I'd almost suggest, William, that you don't really need to worry about ODS preparing you, because it's going to prepare you satisfactorily to, one, complete ODS, and two, launch your career. But then after that, you're going to just keep learning, and that's always going to change.
Yeah, I'll just to echo Joel, I think you said it beautifully. Like officership develops over time, and you guys are lucky that you'll be going to a military internship where that'll be fostered throughout. But there'll be things that they talk about in ODS that you might find yourself hungry for. They'll talk a lot about the officer chief relationship, and that just like doesn't happen as much on the medical side, and doesn't really happen in internship too. But that doesn't mean there won't be development once you get to internship. So I'll just add that too. I think I was looking for that chief mentorship right after, based on everything they talked about in ODS. And it's just a little bit of a difference in our experience versus other people who might be going through it with you. Over.
100% agree with Joel and Kat. I think it did. I was lucky, and I think Joel was also this way too with his internship class. All 5 of us were at ODS together. So it did help us prepare in that space of being a group and interacting together and being that cohort. So like, that's not the purpose of ODS, but it did give us that additional aspect of going through that, learning the ropes together, and then kind of moving to a space that Walter Reed is a little bit more civilian in nature, and so navigating then together as a cohort of translating the Navy Kool-Aid that we just had into how do we keep those standards, or what do we kind of change in that. So there are snippets and there are nuggets that you get from ODS that help you prepare in different ways. And also, I think a lot of gaps that we've already kind of highlighted as well.
Carolyn, I'll go to you, and then I'll answer Hector's comment in the chat.
Hello again. A very big goal of mine is to be able to work with the Marines. For those of you who are attached to a Marine unit, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like day to day, and how you've enjoyed it or not enjoyed it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to the ODS questions. I'm going to save that one just for the tail end, if you don't mind. So let me ask or answer Hector's ODS question, and then we'll loop back around to that if there are no other ODS questions. Does that sound okay? Because I think all of us would be happy to share about our experiences. So Hector asked, is dropout during ODS common? I don't know for all of the cohorts, like I haven't ever really looked at the numbers, but I would say like dropping out, like willingly, like yourself dropping out, I would imagine that's probably pretty low, because like by the time you commission and get to ODS, like you're pretty, like your eyes like on the prize, you know what I mean? Like you're about to be doing it. So I would say maybe like self dropout, probably not. I think the only thing that people like didn't make it at ODS in my class for was height and weight. So like they came in not in height and weight standards, and they were like too far off that standard to like it be feasibly possible for them to get in standard while at ODS. So there was actually a pretty good chunk of people who got sent home the first week, because of that. And so again, just Google height and weight standards for the Navy, and just kind of make sure that you're like sort of close to that, because you don't want to face that.
And just to be clear, those people were told to just like go home, get in standards, and come back. It's not like they were like dropped for good or anything, just to clarify.
Right, yeah. Sanaya, go ahead and answer or ask your question, and then I'll go to Natasha's question in the chat.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a really quick question about the program in terms of like mentorship. So I know you guys kind of touched on this a little bit about how it's important to like build interpersonal relationships. So I was just wondering if there's like any sort of room for like finding mentors or kind of finding that sort of like advisor or guidance during the program.
Something that I did and was kind of instructed to do, find your priors. So priors are people that were enlisted and then now they're coming over into commissioning and they'll be with you at ODS. That's where I kind of sought out some of that mentorship or some of that guidance while at ODS. I live next door to a prior and him and I he's one of the relationships that I've built and continued on from ODS. So and from my understanding, I didn't know of any like official mentorship kind of stuff, but that was the space that I found a lot of that dynamics of going to those who have the enlisted time and can kind of guide you through the process.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd add to that. The Mustangs were great. It's another word for priors. And also, you'll have opportunities. It wouldn't necessarily be a formalized mentorship so much, but you will have some opportunities, at least I did, to have interactions with your chiefs, senior chiefs, with your officers, that kind of stuff, who can provide some, I would say some, I don't know, short-term kind of mentoring that I think for some people maybe led to longer relationships. I'd also add that in my experience of the Navy Psych community in particular, I found fantastic mentorship as I was moving through the process as you guys are, deciding whether or not the Navy internship was right for me, how that looked and everything. And I found that every Navy Psych I talked to was more than willing to give my time, and I would suggest that that remains true. So as you move through this process and you meet folks like us, I would say don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for you, right? We want you to commission in and contribute, right? So we want more Navy Psych. So please, yeah, utilize us as you meet us, right? Because your mentorship effectively starts now if you want it to.
And Dr. Ralph does a really good job for like interns or scholarship recipients or even USIS students. He will connect you with the previous internship class cohort. And so he will, he does a really good job of that. And then obviously it's on you to reach out and to make that connection. But you get a like sponsor. And so that will be assigned to you. And that person can help you prior to ODS as well. And they just did ODS the class before, so they'll have the fresh gouge. But like my sponsor was super great because she told me lots of information. And, she like took me to the uniform shop before I went to ODS and was like, here's what you need and here's what you don't need. And so there's also that like kind of more official, sponsorship mentorship process that'll happen once you're accepted to one of the Navy psychology pipelines. So I'm just going to read here for the people who aren't looking at the chat, but somebody said, besides training physically, is there anything else that you would recommend preparing for? Example, memorizing the Sailor's Handbook. And Kat said that there's a gouge sheet that you can Google and study. I think all of us would probably recommend having some familiarity with it before you get to ODS, because once you're at ODS, there's just not a lot of time to cram that information into your brain. You will have time. It's just when you're kind of like sleep deprived and want to hang out with friends more, like it's crummy to like study that little sheet. So you can download that gouge sheet beforehand. And you'll have time to study. You'll have assigned study times. That's what Kat said there too. But like for me, if it's study or like have conversations with people in the hallway, 10 out of 10, I'm choosing conversations in the hallway. So, you might want to just like think about that. And let's see. Okay, yeah. And then any other questions about ODS? And then we can loop back around to Carolyn's question.
I don't have a question, but I have a final thought if nobody has questions. And it's something that like I didn't learn until this phrase until later, and it was in regards to something else, but I think it absolutely applies here. Like we're all psychologists or training to be psychologists, and like mantras work best. And so this is a pump, not a filter. It does not want to filter you out. It wants you to be in because it wants more psychologists. It wants to pump you through. So just don't resist. just let yourself go, right? Like let the pump work. So in the times where it feels hard or you feel overwhelmed, just try to remember it's a pump, not a filter.
That's so good. I'm putting that in my back pocket and keeping that.
That is great. If,
Um,
if I could
sorry.
also add a sign off too. Sorry, Sam. Something that I was told, and this is going to also be kind of a choose your own adventure, but kind of what I said with the PRT, C's get degrees. There's going to be collateral opportunities. Collaterals are like additional duties, leadership roles, leadership positions. I'm the kind of person that I'm always raising my hand. Going into ODS, my mentor actually encouraged me not to. He encouraged me to don't volunteer for the leadership positions, don't kind of put yourself in additional duties on top of what you're already going to have to do. It's a huge overturn, as I think we've kind of alluded to today, right? There's a lot of identity changes. There's a lot of things that you're already managing. There's absolutely no reason to add to your plate unless you absolutely have to. You won't, like, nobody cares what leadership role you had at ODS. Nobody cares if you were wing commander. Nobody cares if you were company commander. I don't remember the terms now, but like, it doesn't matter. So don't feel like you have to raise your hand. If you want to, and that's the adventure that you want to choose, then like all for it. But you will not get in trouble. You will not be looked down upon or anything like that if you decide to not volunteer for a position. If you're at ODS and you need some additional like support, a reminder of that, shoot me an email, like reach out to me. I will remind you in the moment, because I had to do that to my mentor of being like, are you sure I shouldn't? And he's like, yes, do not put your hand down. Does not matter.
Kat, you want to tell about probably the only collateral anyone should ever consider?
Yeah, remedial swim instructor. That is the only one that matters, y'all. If you can get remedial swim instructor, social chair actually seemed pretty fun too, I'll say, but like definitely avoid Divo, ADivo, any of the, I don't even remember what they're called, but the people who like keep our cadence, like they were losing their voices, they were getting drift down, like social chair. If you end up being that extrovert, Joel, I probably would have told you not to do social chair if you like your alone time, but I like remedial swim instructor was really fun. I think I got in the pool like 2 or 3 extra times with folks, and it was just like more like one-on-one time. So if you were ever a lifeguard, like remedial swim instructor is not a hard lift, and it actually provided more fun. Yeah.
And she was able to like skip out on some of the lectures that we didn't really need, and like had to leave early for stuff. And I'm like, that was a good call. Like that was a good pull. So
I missed a couple group PT sessions. Not to say that like that's why you should do it, but it was like some unstructured time that like made me feel like I had a little bit of feedback.
All right. So Carolyn, we'll talk a little bit about the Marine Corps. So after you do your internship year, whatever pipeline you come in through, whether it's HPSP, the fellow, or well, not the postdoc, that's different. But whether it's HPSP, USIS, or the internship program, after you do your internship year, that's where you're going to get your first assignment list. You'll get a list. You'll get to rank them. For your preference, you'll get to give a little bit of an explanation, and then they'll place you in ideally your top 4, or sometimes 5, and that's okay. And usually there are Marine Corps billet, like embedded billets on there. There's at least, I would say at least like 1 or 2, but most of the time coming out of internship, historically you've been placed at hospitals. However, we're kind of shifting to a more embedded nature, and there are definitely a lot more Marine billets that need to be filled. So there's a pretty high likelihood that that's at least going to be an option for you. During your internship training year, especially at San Diego, if you were an HPSP recipient, you wouldn't go to San Diego, you would go to Portsmouth from my understanding. But you learn about some of the Marine Corps components and that Marine Corps culture to kind of best prepare you for that billet placement. And it's different than the Navy from sometimes a cultural standpoint and sometimes the work that you'll do, but in general, it's still really exciting and really fun. So I'll let Kat and Anna jump in on kind of explaining their experience.
Yeah, I think Kat had to run, but I can go into mine. So I'm in an interesting space, a little bit different embedded way, because I'm actually with Med Battalion, which is a Navy command. So my immediate chain of command is actually all Navy. Versus Sam, are you all Marine, or is your
Yeah, so
CO?
I'm all Marine. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm a slightly different because I'm embedded with the Marines. We support the Marines, but my actual immediate chain is still Navy. So we get integrated in a different way. The space that I operate in is providing kind of all the clinical care for the Marine Logistics Group, which comes out to about 8,000 Marines and sailors total. So it's a pretty nice balance of clinical load, about half time. And then we also support what's called Rule 2 or Rule 2 facilities, which are field hospitals. So imagine like giant tents that you would have a wedding reception in, but out in a field and a hospital. So you have a emergency room, you have a surgical suite, you have a holding ward, and then you have like a bunch of patient transfers and things like that. So that's the mission of the Med Battalion, is to put those together. So being embedded with the Marines, it's definitely been an opportunity to get more hands-on with things outside of the hospital. So being a part of that field hospital, going out camping basically, and then doing your job in a giant tent, putting on like 30 pounds on your back and walking in a straight line for 2 hours, things like that I think give a little bit nice flavorings and a nice little break up to the day-to-day from the clinical grind, giving in kind of that more closer to this tip of the spear type of stuff. So somebody that drinks the Kool-Aid super hard, Marine Corps has been super fun because you're around a lot of really motivated individuals.
Yeah, and I think one thing to point out too, almost all the Marine Corps billets are what we call embedded. And so that's a different kind of role than being, you know, at a clinic or at a hospital specifically. And so like in my embedded role, like to Anna's point, like it's 50% clinical care roughly. Like sometimes we just get floods of folks and that goes up and down a little bit. But then, okay, what do we do with the other 50%? Usually it's broken up into a couple of different hats. One of them is command consultation. So you're going to be interfacing with line leaders, really advising them on maybe some good psych health stuff, talking to them about their Marines specifically, attending meetings that are called force preservation councils, which is kind of a space where the Marines will go over all of their folks and make sure that everybody's doing okay. And like chaplains are in that meeting, our resiliency counselors are in there, some of the other non-clinical counselors attend those meetings just to kind of make sure that the force is staying ready from like a psychological standpoint, considering all their life factors. So we do a lot of command consultation, consulting with the leaders. And then we also do a lot of prevention and like resiliency stuff. So like sometimes there's opportunity to lead trainings, there's opportunity to, kind of teach some stuff, there's opportunity to build new programs, embed yourself in other Marine Corps programs that are already established, right? So what I think is so much fun about the embedded role is that you do have a lot of flex and kind of, doing things that are of interest to you to simply help ensure that the Marines stay a ready fighting force from a mental health perspective. And so you really, like Anna just typed here, like choosing your own adventure. So you really do get an opportunity to grow in a number of different ways when you're in an embedded role. However, I will say that from what I've heard is also true if you're in an embedded role with like submarines or ships or on the Navy side as well. So there's like some cultural components that in each, there's a cultural component with carrier psychs, there's a cultural component with sub psychs, there's a cultural component, kind of in anything that you would do. But in general, like you're gonna have kind of an exciting experience in the subculture that you're in, whether it be Navy or Marine Corps.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah, Sanaya, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had one more question, which is also a little bit unrelated to ODS.
Okay.
But I was just, so like one of the populations that I'm interested in working with in the future would be like peds. And so I was kind of wondering if any of you have had experiences with that population, or if you know what that would kind of look like serving in the Navy.
I have an
Um,
answer, but I'll hold it because I think one of you can answer too.
I have, sure, yeah, I can address that from my vantage of what I see being based in a clinic here, right? Here at the Branch Health Clinic, of course, we serve active duty members and their beneficiaries, right? Which include kids. Here at our facility, we actually don't, from psychology standpoint, we don't serve kids. It's actually not within our credentialing to do so. But there is fellowship opportunities in pediatric psychology. I have a colleague that was in Iwakuni. That was kind of her field. We also have some child psychiatrists here in Yokosuka, which is the main base up near Tokyo. So whereas you may not necessarily get in a position right away in which you're able to achieve that, there are avenues that you can explore. The primary one really being that fellowship, or another term you might hear it referred to as DUINS, or duty under instruction. It's a 2-year program. You would apply for that probably after your first duty station and after licensure, but then you'd be able to do that. You would literally step out of active duty for about 2 years. You're still getting paid. You're still on the roll, but you aren't considered, kind of in that, you're considered more reservist. You get the training for 2 years, and then you would come back in for a 4-year commitment. So it's kind of like doing internship again, except just double the time. And Sam, I can turn it back to you.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. There are definitely some clinics spread out across the Navy that serve dependents. And like Joel said, like there may be opportunity to kind of branch out in that way. But pending credentialing, right? Like, so that's different than licensure. The Navy has its own like weird credentialing system. So yeah, there's definitely opportunity later in your career, but for your internship year, most of the time, you're not working with peds right away. I came in with a lot of peds experience, and then really fell in love with working with young adults and adults in general. And so I've since kind of gone away from that. But if that still seems to be something that feels true for you, definitely opportunities later in your career.
That sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions really? Okay, so more of a logistical question here from Madison. What does the timeline look like of getting orders to ODS and flying to Newport? I'm wondering if we're supposed to book our own flights after getting orders and what that process looks like. Oh, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, so after you've been accepted, I'm assuming this may be about the internship process. I'm going to make an assumption, and Maddie, you can correct me in the chat, or Madison, I apologize, can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. But if you're doing the internship process yes, okay. So once you've matched, right, you find out, yay, you're good to go. You will get orders, and you can't really do anything without those orders. Your recruiter, though, will help liaison all of your travel stuff. So no, you do not have to organize your own travel flights or hotel or anything like that. They will help you do all of that. So don't plan on buying anything. It will likely be last minute though. However, they will get you on a plane that will get you there on time. So don't stress about not getting there when you need to get there. They're going to get you there. But you might not find out your flight details until like 2 days before. I think that's when I found mine. I think it was like 2 or 3 days before I was leaving. I was like, I know I'm leaving on this day, but like what plane I'm getting on, I don't know. And there just happened to be like this wild storm that came through the East Coast when we flew out. So I ended up getting grounded in some place and like layover for super long. And it was a whole travel mess, but your recruiter will like know how to navigate you through that process. You also can't start your move until you get your orders. And so once you get your orders, then you can go online to the company where you start your move process. The Navy will move you and your supplies and your dependents. to wherever you are getting stationed. But you can't do that until you have orders. So I was stuck in a little bit of a conundrum with that too, because my orders, I didn't get my orders until I think 30 days before ODS. But I needed to sell a house. And in order to sell a house, you got to get your stuff out of the house. So it was a little bit of a timing, conundrum. And you just got to kind of play with what you got. But it won't be super, super early. How early did you guys get your orders?
I was the last in my group to get on the scroll and to get my orders. So it was probably like the beginning of July. I'm lucky in that I was at FSU, so I was on the East Coast, and then I was moving up to Walter Reed, and then up to Newport. So they're kind of in a line. I looked to have as much control as possible in a process that you have very, very little control. So I ended up doing what's called a Diddy move, or a do it yourself. So that way I could kind of plan out dates and things. And I had like a whole chain. I was moving all my stuff myself instead of the Navy coming to my house and packing it up. So I had that all set up. And then that way, once I got the orders, I could just press go, and then I got reimbursed on the back end. So I paid up front for my move, and then the Navy gave me money back to cover the cost. That was I knew that there was a chance that I would mess something up or lose a receipt or something and maybe not get the same amount, but I wanted that control on the front end. I also drove up to ODS instead of flying. So me and a shipmate, we got a car together and we carpooled up because it was close enough. We left from Walter Reed. It was close enough where we could get up there within a reasonable time. So that also helped on the end as well. We had that control of deciding when we left, how we got there. So if possible, and if somebody's looking to do something like that, happy to talk through what I did in that Diddy move and the driving yourself type of side of the house. But yeah, my orders were pretty late. It was like early July, maybe even mid-July before they really pushed through. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it over to Joel to add whatever he wants to add. Your orders are long. They're a multi-page thing. They won't make a lot of sense, but read through it. Definitely read through your entire set of orders. It includes all of those things that Sam's talking about. So it includes phone numbers for places to call. It includes kind of resources that are available, and it includes like next steps for some things, like things that you might need to do. So every single time, this time definitely, but every single time you get orders, read your orders, please. I printed them out, highlighted, circled, starred, step 1, 2, 3, them. So read your orders.
I'll foot stomp that. Read your orders. There's instructions in them of things you have to do. So you want to highlight what those are and do those in advance. I feel like I got a little maybe more fortunate than you guys. I feel like I got my orders a little bit more in advance, and I didn't feel quite as crunched. So that's nice. I also did a Diddy move, but I relied on my spouse to do that. So thank God, and to all of you who do that on your own, God bless you. Also to kind of recognize that though you will get all of your travel arranged for you, you do have some control in it. You can modify your travel arrangements. You'll call an organization called SATO. They're basically like they're the military travel agency. And so, for example, I decided that from ODS, my spouse met me for graduation, and then we drove together to Maryland in order to do the Navy 101. Hung out for the weekend, and then they headed home. And so we modified our travel arrangements from a flight to have a rental car and then depart back to Minnesota from Maryland, where we completed our move. So know that you can do that. Just be prepared to have a very long hold time.
Yeah, I think everybody's way of getting themselves from their home of record to their duty station and the timing in which they do that, I think I've heard a million and two variations of what people do. And it's really about what fits you, what fits your family, and the timing of how everything works out. So once you get closer to that point, I think it's helpful to have a mentor to kind of just talk through your specific situation and kind of how to do things. Like, um, yeah, because I think you both of you sharing your situations. Mine was totally different, and we don't have to go into mine, but like, just find a mentor so that you can figure out what works for you and your timing. And if you have questions, there will be people there to kind of help you along the way.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would add too, if there's something that you want, um, I used to always say, ask the question, can I do this, right? Just ask. But actually I've modified that a little, not from can I do this to how do I do it? Just assume that you can until someone tells you no, but ask people how it's done. So there's just, if you recognize you want something, just ask, how do I do this? And sometimes you'll get a very clear answer and it's easy, and sometimes you'll get a more complex one. But most of the time you'll get something that works in your favor.
yeah.
And sometimes depending on what it is, if you recall and get a different person on the other end of the line, you might get a different answer.
That's true.
I will also say, I'm sorry, butting in again, if possible, I would have at least a plan or something in the works for your move to your next space, to Navy 101, to internship, whatever that looks like, before ODS. My roommate at ODS, she was not in psychology, but she was a nurse, and she hadn't done any prep, any contact with anybody to move her things. And she was supposed to report directly. So she was trying to, in this space and in the free time, manage it and get all the phone calls that she needed to get, figure out power of attorney so that her boyfriend could, like, it was a mess. So if you can, at least think through, try and make a plan and do as much as possible prior to ODS. That would be another thing that I would definitely highlight, because it's going to go fast. Once you go to ODS and you go to Navy Medicine 101, then you go to internship and you're starting. So you want to have your stuff at least en route to you
Yeah.
when you're starting internship.
Somebody asked if there is a graduation similar to boot camp. Yes, there is. Anna answered it in the chat, but I'll just briefly say here, yes, they give you a limited number of tickets. Families are welcome to come. However, for us as Navy psychologists, we immediately go to Navy 101 after that. So just kind of keep that in consideration. You won't have a ton of time to spend with your family, maybe a day or two over the weekend, and then you're going to need to go up to Navy Med 101. Any other questions? Yeah, Carolyn, go ahead.
That brought up a question. So for Navy Psych 101 that you guys were talking about, during that week-long period, are you like sequestered in the same way, or are you able to have contact? Can your spouse be with you? What does that look like?
Your spouse isn't able to be with you, but you are well, I'll tell about my experience and you guys can tell about yours because y'all kind of came a little bit after me. But we're in a hotel, we're in single room hotels, you got your own room, you wore your khakis every day, you sat in a classroom and got more fire hose PowerPoints, but it was basically Navy medicine specific. So when you go to ODS, I think like Anna had explained at the beginning of the call, you're going to be with all kinds of different corps, naval corps. And this is specific to those who are doing Navy medicine. And in the Navy, we are in medical service corps. So it'll be basically medical corps, dental corps, and medical service corps. Those are, I think, the three corps that go to.
And nurses.
And nursing corps. Thank you. Yes. So those are the folks who are at Navy Med 101. It's in a pretty nice hotel. You get off at 5. You're able to explore the DC area afterwards. It's really not a bad gig. So yeah. And you get like a per diem for your meals, and it's not a bad per diem. So yeah.
I lived at home because I lived like 2 miles down from where Navy Medicine was. So I lived at home, but another one of my cohort mates, she took the Navy up on the hotel offer, even though she lived in the area technically. So options.
Thank you so much.
Joel put his email in the chat, so if you're interested in reaching out to him, his email's in the chat. I'll pop my email in the chat as well. If anybody has any other follow-up questions. I see Hector typing, so I'll wait until he comes through. Oh no, he just disappeared. Maybe he doesn't have a question. He or she doesn't have a question. Oh, he was just thinking, or he or she was just thinking. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining the call. I appreciate your time. I hope that this was helpful. And I hope that we are able to give you some information that you found valuable. Please reach out to us. I'll put my email in the chat as well, especially if you are a recipient of the HPSP scholarship, or you are accepted into the internship program, or you're about to go to USIS, and you are on the track and you're already going. Definitely reach out to one of us. And if we can't help you, we know somebody who can. If you're in the pipeline and you're in the application process, just keep your head up. Keep pushing, keep trying. If you don't get what you think you want to do the first time, if you don't get the HPSP scholarship, there are other opportunities to join the Navy. And so we have a handful of pipelines. And so I just hope that if this is something that you wish to do in the community that you hope to be a part of, that you will keep pursuing in whatever endeavor excites you. So thank you all so much. We appreciate your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, or morning.
Good luck, everyone. Yeah, do reach out if you want.
Good to see you, Joel.
Nice to see you, Anna. Thanks, Sam, for doing this and
Yeah,
accommodating my
absolutely.
timing. That was great.
Thank you all. Thank you both so much for jumping on. I really appreciate it. This was, I think, very valuable and great. So I'm going to stop the recording now. Let's see. Stop. I hope it asks me what I want to do.